open up your Bibles, if you would, to Job chapter 29. Job chapter 29. I remember when I was growing up, I could not wait to get out of the 1980s. And I couldn't wait to get to the 90s. 90s finally came around, and then I just couldn't wait for the turn of the century, year 2000. You'll remember that? Some of you don't. You were alive. You remember that? Were you excited about the turn of the century, being part of that? And then I couldn't wait till I started thinking, well, I can't wait till we get really far into this new century, into the 20s. And now that I'm finally here, I've caught myself telling people, man, I miss the 80s. And what do we call that? When we start feeling that way? I guess when we get older, or maybe other things may happen. What do we call it when we start acting like that? Nostalgic. The good old days, right? We want to talk about the good old days. Anybody else feels that way? You miss the good old days? What do you miss about the good old days? What do you miss about it? Your kids being younger, being at home, good old days. Yeah, I understand that. My kids are still little, but we have pictures that come up on a screen all the time of when they were just little chubby cheeks and whatnot. Miss those days. At least I think I do. What else? What do you miss about the good old days? Yeah. What's that? Good times. Maybe when you could run better. Play more basketball, do more things. The good old days. Job in chapter 29 misses the good old days. And he starts off here in chapter 29 verses 1 through 6 when he was close, or when God, not he, but when God was close to him. Look there at those verses. And Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in months gone by, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, and my children were around me, when my steps were bathed in butter, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil." Let's examine this for a second. So here he is saying the same thing. Oh, that I were in months gone by. So that's just like saying the good old days, right? He's talking about in the past. Now, when you talk about you miss something from the past, do you still have it in the present? Usually no. Usually you do not. He misses this. He misses those old days. And what is the first thing he misses about the old days that he mentions there? When God watched over him. So now he's saying, does God watch over him now? That's right. What is Job saying? Job is implying he's not. And then when God's lamp shone over my head, and his light, and by his light I walked through darkness. He could see the way, but where's that light at now? He doesn't see it. He doesn't see it. And he also talks about his children. He misses them. He wishes they were still there. And so here he is thinking about those good old days, and he misses them. And at that time, there was that time of honor there in verses 7 through 11. So here's some of those good old days when I went out to the gate of the city, when I took my seat in the square. The young men saw me and hid themselves, and the old men arose and stood. The princes stopped talking and put their hands on their mouths. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck to their palate. For when the ear heard, it called me blessed. And when the eye saw, it gave witness of me. So there it is, that gate of the city. We've seen this crop up in other passages throughout the Bible. I should have put that picture. There was a excavation in Gerza, And they found one where one of these old roads were leading into the old city. And when you walk in on the main road, there were these U-shaped benches of rock. There was 3 of them, and they were pretty long. You could probably sit about 15 people in each one of these little areas. There was 3 of them as you were walking into that city. And what people would do is, as you come in, they would sit down, and they would have discourse, or that's where they would come and find judgment. Do you remember who would go to the gates of the city in order to convince the people that he was a better judge than his father, and he could judge better? Do you remember who that was? Absalom did that. He went to the gates of the city where everyone would gather and talk. This was the place. And Job is remembering when he would go there, what would happen when he showed up? First, young men saw me and hid themselves. That's a weird way of putting it in our English, but what that word is actually saying there, hid, in the Hebrew is they didn't hide themselves, but they were sitting there and they saw Job coming. The young people would get up and move out of the way. When I was growing up, if I was sitting down somewhere and an older person walked in and there was nowhere for them to sit, you get up and you give your seat to them, to the elder. I still do that today, and people find it strange, but that's the way I grew up. I try to teach my kids to do the same. And that's what they're doing. It's great respect for Job. They see him. And so they get up and they get out of the way for Job and all the others who may be of more noble birth or older than they are to come and talk. It's time for the adults to come in and talk. So here they get up, they hide themselves. The old men arose and stood. Yes, that's a sign of respect. Because in those days, when you sat, what did you sit to do? To teach. A lot of times the teacher would sit. And so you would come and he would sit. Everyone else would stand and listen. The princes stopped talking and put their hands over their mouth. They wouldn't say anything. Everyone of note and everyone of age would listen to what Job had to say. And when was that? The good old days. Why aren't they listening to him now? He's in pitiful shape. Okay, true. So that his friends have come along. Are they listening to anything Job has to say? Not at all. And he's reminding them, you guys used to listen to everything. You would close your mouths and you would listen to me. What changed? Not just that he was pitiful, but what? They think he is a sinner, that he has committed sin. Now let's back up a second to verses 1 through 6. Does Job think God's light shines upon him? No, he does not think it does. But does Job think he sinned? No. Now in the previous chapters, Job wished, remember, he wished he could present his case before God. And why did he want to do that? To prove he was not a sinner. Why would he feel like he needs to prove to God he was not a sinner? Okay, he proved to his friends, okay. But yet God's hand was heavy upon him, and he would not relent. He wished God would turn his face away from him. Do you think maybe Job's had that same mentality in his mind that those who were righteous were blessed and those who suffered must be sinners? Maybe he had that a little bit in his mind. What do you think? It'd be hard not to. Especially what's going on, especially with his friends. But even though, and we see it sprinkled out, that mentality is there, he's recognized something. That can't be true. I haven't done anything. And he's held fast to that. The reason why I keep pointing this out, you may remember when we first started this study, I started by looking at that, the way God answers Job. We hear nothing about Job. It's just all of a sudden the Lord comes out of that whirlwind and he begins to ask him those questions. And Then the Lord, it's chapter 38, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? What? Now he's talking about Job. He's the one that's darkening counsel with words without knowledge. That's who he's talking to. He's answering Job. And I think we'll see that the comments that the Lord makes a lot more sense if we see that Job thinks God is coming after me for no good reason. But does the Lord ever actually answer or explain to him why these things happen to him? He does not. But we'll look at that when we get there. And so he misses the good old days when the Lord was close, that time of honor. Then verses 12 to 17. Because, and this is the why. Here's why everyone listened to Job, or some of the reasons why. Because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the orphan who had no helper. The blessing of the one ready to perish came upon me, and I made the widow's heart sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I investigated the case, which I did not know. I broke the jaws of the wicked and snatched the prey from his teeth. Okay. So concern for others. Anything in that passage that sticks out to you about Job and what he has done? And why bring all this stuff up? Remember, he's talking to his friends there. They're the ones listening. I like that second part of verse 16. And I investigated the case which I did not know. So if someone brought something to him and he didn't know anything about it, maybe it was they needed to know something about righteousness, or maybe they needed some sort of judgment. He didn't just give whatever he thought right then and there. If he didn't know, he would, well, let me look into that. He didn't pretend to know everything, but he would investigate those things, whatever it took, in order to help people out. He was always helping the needy. He was always looking after the widow and the children and those who were being hurt unlawfully. And he's reminding his friends of these things. Here's the things I did. These are the good old days. People honor me. And they honor me because I cared for people. What sin have I done? In verses 18 to 20. Then I thought, back then, when all this was going on, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root is spread out to the waters, and dew lies all night on my branch. My glory is ever new with me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. All right. So maybe because of the life he had, how people listened to him, maybe Job thought he would die a peaceful death because of those things. Isn't that what he seems to be saying there in those verses? I'm going to die, man. Look, things are going well. Everyone comes to me for counsel. I am right with the Lord. My days are going to be great. And I'm going to die in my home a peaceful death. Is that not? He's saying that's what he thought. That's what he used to think. What does that sound like? Is there anything wrong with thinking that? True. And maybe he didn't think he'd be tested. Well, I mean, he's yeah, he's passing the test, but he didn't think it was going to come. He thought, this seems to lend toward the idea that he thought being righteous afforded him a blessed life. And that blessed life was going to continue because he wasn't going to sin. And he's going to get into that more in the next chapter about the things I would avoid. I would not let my eyes gaze upon a virgin, things of that nature. He did whatever he could to stay away from anything that would cause him sin. And so he thought his life was going so well, I'm going to die at home, I'm going to die in my nest, a peaceful life. I miss the good old days. And I don't blame him, the things he's going through. And then he goes again in verses 21 and 25. Others sought his counsel. To me they listened and waited and kept silent for my counsel. After my words they did not speak again. And my speech dropped on them. They waited for me as for the rain, and opened their mouth as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they did not believe, and the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose a way for them and sat as chief, and dwelt as a king among the troops, as one who comforted the mourners. So here again remembers how people used to treat him. And I like that he adds that in there in verse 24. I smiled on them when they did not believe. How do you interpret that?
He knew he was right.
He knew he was right. We didn't give him a hard time about it. Well, okay. I mean,
We'll see how it plays out.
we'll see how it plays out, but
Pretty sure right.
that's right. That's what it does seem like. He didn't get angry about it. If you nowadays, if you have a disagreement with somebody and you're not falling in line with the way they think, I found from a lot of folks they get angry and they get upset that I am not falling in behind with whatever way they're thinking. And I may just I'll just smile at him like, okay, but whatever. He doesn't fall into those kinds of traps. He doesn't allow that to create a division. He just smiles and lets it be, and he moves on. And now we look at where he's at. And when you think about that, when you read this chapter, it makes it seem like it was years ago. I mean, I don't know how much time passed, but it doesn't feel like it's been years. I guess it could have been. I think I remember us investigating that a little bit. It's been like maybe a year or two. But I guess when you've gone through all the things Job's gone through, what would that feel like? It was to feel like forever. Time, especially when you can't sleep and you're in pain nonstop. Feels like you're in that way for a long time. I remember first time I got COVID, and I was in bed and I couldn't sleep. Man, I felt like I was sick forever. It was never going to go away. Difficult time for Job. And so he is reminiscing here about the good old days. And when he finishes that up here in 29, gets over to chapter 30, he talks about, but now those younger than I, what do they do now? Mock me. They mock me. At the very beginning, he talks about how he missed how things were, and now they mock Job. They treat him poorly. And why do they do that? It's got to be because they think he has committed a sin. And of course, he's asked them several times what it was, and they couldn't point it out. He can't look at anything, but he's wondering, where's God? I missed the time when God was looking down upon me and had light upon me. And I think at this point, surely we can see why God answers him the way he does. Well, who darkens my counsel? Well, if you know everything, Job, answer me these things. He did not sin, but he did not have the right mindset either. He didn't have all the information either. And a lot of times, neither do we. Neither do we. Can anyone here say they know the Bible? That's the attitude we should always have. There have been many times where I thought, man, I remember things so well, or I know a particular passage so well, and someone will come along and ask a question that I did not consider. I'll have to stop and think, oh, I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that. I didn't even think about it that way. There's been a lot of times, even in classes on a Sunday morning, where I'll be saying something, and usually Alex will say something, I'll go, well, I didn't look at it that way. Maybe. And I like that. And what does the proverb writer say about when those moments happen? How should we look at that? Iron sharpens iron. iron sharpens. Let's take a look at it again. Let me look at that with a new pair of eyes or different glasses, the way you see that. And maybe I'm wrong. And we're always striving to do what? Find the truth. And that is what Job wants to do. I think he wants to know what is going on. I recognize that the wicked don't always get punished. Remember, he even had chapters where he went into that. But then every once in a while he'll come back to himself and he's like, but why am I? Why am I being punished? Why is this happening? If I could bring my case to the Lord, maybe this would all stop. I think he's been struggling with this mindset that he has had all this time, just like the same mindset his friends have. But now he's recognizing this doesn't work. This doesn't fit. And he never sinned. He never gave in because he knew he hadn't done anything wrong. And that is why I think he is a great man, because he knew he didn't do anything wrong, and so he held fast to that conviction. And because of that, the Lord blessed him. And the best blessing isn't all the material things he gets at the end, but he gets an entire book in the Bible about that situation. How would you like for that to happen for you? For God to say, that moment in your life when you struggled, you did so well, you're going to be an example for all my people for the rest of this world's life. What a blessing Job has been for us. Any other thoughts on that passage? Any comments? I think it's a pretty easy one to go through, but I think it does give us an insight to what's going on in his mind. And we'll see more of that as we go through each one of these chapters. We end out all the things that Job's going to say. And in the last 6 chapters before the Lord, Elihu, I'm going to combine all that into one. And then we'll move one chapter again after that, looking at what the Lord has to say